Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Ria. I'm a compulsive overeater and bulimic. It is Sunday, March 2nd, and today we are talking about recovery from relapse. Um, so I want to I want to share look at, I should say, two stories from the big book that outline relapse pretty concisely. The first is Jim. Jim, we can read about, is on page, hold on, where are we? We're on page 35. Okay. So of the big book. So before we read Jim's story, at the top of that um, page on 35, it says, so we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. So they're not saying here that food is the crux of the problem. They're saying our thinking is the crux of the problem, right? The mental state. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? So, when I talk about my experience of recovery from relapse, I'm not going to talk about the food. I'm going to talk about what I was thinking. Okay. And when they talk about Jim, who, they very quickly talk about how he's a charming guy, he has a nice family. He inherited a car company, which means his family has money. He did well in the World War. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's a cool guy. He's a little nervous and he never drank until he was 35, but once he did, it was like a firestorm. Um, so the alcoholics came to talk to him and they told him about alcoholism, right? And it says toward the bottom of the page, third paragraph, he made a beginning. So this is not someone who didn't know about alcoholism or know about AA. So he got his life together, reassembled his family, started working as a salesman for the business he used to own. Okay. Um, and then it says, all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. On the next page, yet he got drunk again. Okay? So there's a connection here between the fact that he failed to enlarge his spiritual life and his continuation to get drunk. Now I want to go a little bit farther. On page 39, they talk about Fred, who's a partner in a well-known accounting firm. Okay, so this is a super successful guy. He's very dapper. I think of like Mad Men in the late 50s, early 60s. These guys with their like fancy shiny suits and their like cocktails and smoking like 1,000 cigarettes. But anyway, he's doing really well. He There's nothing he doesn't have. And then he went to the hospital because he couldn't stop drinking. And these guys explained alcoholism to him. And he said, "Thank you so much for this information. Now that I know better, I just won't drink anymore." So he goes on his merry way, and for a while, everything's okay. And he basically said, "Listen, I took care of everything else in my life. Look, I'm like killing it. I'm doing a great job. So I can definitely handle this. I can't drink anymore, fine." And then one day he goes to Washington, D.C. for a business something or other, and he's doing, nothing's going on with him. It was like almost like he's walking down the street and there's an uncovered manhole that he doesn't see, and he just falls in. And all of a sudden he goes, as I cross the threshold of the dining room, this is page 41, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all. And then you turn around and he does not remember the next few days, lands in the airport, and ends up back in AA. Okay. So I have an experience that's sort of a combination of those two stories. I got abstinent for the first time when I was 22 years old. Um, and it worked. It took 2 years for me to get there, but I got abstinent with a very stringent food plan and really went through the process of first losing the weight and then getting really into the steps, having a spiritual experience, and doing the things that were helping me. And that lasted for 15 years. And I was able to help a lot of people, thank God. But some interesting things started to happen toward the end of those 15 years. The first thing was that my life got very big because of recovery. When I started recovery, I was a single girl who was 22 years old. By the time I had my relapse, I was a mom of five children, married, a homeowner, and working full time. So there were a lot of things that happened that I was like, I was putting recovery less and less at the top of the totem pole because, listen, I had this thing. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what the deal is. I just have to just do it in the end, you know? I wasn't really getting to meetings because Zoom wasn't a thing yet. It was, if you don't get to your live meetings, you're not getting to meetings, you know? And I don't personally don't like phone meetings. They're difficult for me. Zoom meetings I like because I can look at something, but phone meetings were very difficult for me to go to. And I started letting things slide. I'm too busy. I have too much going on. My kids need too much for me. I'm a young mom. Married, so I have an extra child. And it's not so easy. So that was one piece. Now, mind you, I want to say that during those 15 years, I had major spiritual experiences. It's not like I didn't work the steps and I didn't have a spiritual experience and I didn't have a connection with God. That's not the truth. I really did. I was working my butt off for a while. Um, but at some point, I failed to enlarge my spiritual life, or I stopped failing to enlarge my spiritual life. The other piece also is that some of you know I'm an observant Jew, and when I started having these spiritual experiences, I started to conflate my religion with my spirituality in some ways. And for some people, that melding is a really positive thing and they augment each other. For me, like I started thinking that I needed to do more religiously in order to maintain the spirituality when really what I needed to do was keep that relationship going and then organically take on things that felt like it was right to do at the time. I went about it backwards, but that's okay. That's a learning curve for me. And thank God I've moved through that. But the point was like, again, I was sort of moving away from the spiritual practices that were really helping me. And then the final thing that happened was that um, I was working in a job that I actually really enjoyed. And part of the job compensation was that we got an apartment over my place of work, and my son got free preschool in the synagogue across the street. And it was a good situation. Everything was fine. I was abstinent, doing my thing. And somebody went to the administration of this synagogue that I worked for and told them something about me that was completely untrue. And I lost my job overnight. Um, and losing my job didn't just mean losing my job, it meant losing my home and it meant losing my child's school. And we had to just regroup. At that same time, I went to the rabbi of this synagogue and I said, listen, I'm very open about pretty much everything. I'm a writer by profession. I write very publicly about my addiction. We can discuss this. This is not a big deal. We can just talk openly about this. Like, let's be adults. And this rabbi, who was supposed to be a God-centered clergy person, looked at me and said, this is the age of Facebook. The truth doesn't matter. And I have a job to protect. And like very frankly said that to me. And it wrecked me. That wrecked me because I guess I thought naively that as someone who really is committed to living a life of integrity and honesty, that somebody who makes that their profession would do the same. But it taught me that people are people, no matter what they do. Um, anyway, long story short, it was a hugely traumatic experience for me for a variety of reasons. I had, like losing everything literally overnight. Not being able to speak for myself, sort of feeling like my voice was taken away and conflated with my chosen religion, which I tried to be such a good girl to fit into. It really, the injustice of it was really difficult for me. And I held on to that because I didn't want to live in a world where something like that could happen to me. I didn't want to accept the fact that this happened. I wanted to hold on to my victimhood and to the injustice of it because that was the only way that I could feel like I could get justice. It was my lack of faith in God that things were meant to happen the way they were meant to happen. And the truth is, like, looking back, I still can't say I'm glad it happened because I'm not, but a lot of good things did come out of it. But anyway, I this happened in 2014. And then for a few years, I kept working my program, but something was off. Something was just off with me. Um, I was really prickly and tense, and my spirit, I didn't know how to separate like my spirituality from the religion. And then like even though I loved God and trusted God and felt so connected, I also felt really betrayed. Not by God, just betrayed by, I think I made this mental deal with myself. I told myself this story that, like, okay, I'm abstinent. I am living a life of integrity and honesty and principles. So that means that nothing bad is ever going to happen to me again. Like, God, you're good. You're just going to protect me now. Like, things are going to be good now. I didn't I didn't understand that I don't make the rules, that I don't get to, just because I choose to live in a certain way doesn't mean I'm automatically protected from people who don't choose to live that way. Anyway, fast forward, this must be, yeah, toward the end of middle of 2019. I start getting thoughts, it's been 15 years. I could probably stop weighing and measuring my food. Then it became, I'd probably eat sugar and again. Like I mean, listen, I was younger then. It wasn't such a big, it was an addictive thing. Now I know better. I know what it's about. So like I could just have like certain amounts. It's not a big deal. So I was talking to my sponsor about it at the time, and she was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Um, but of course she said it like, I know I can't have it. But really she was saying, you better not freaking have it. So I fired her. And this is somebody I'd worked with for years. And I found someone who was a proponent of intuitive eating. And I know there are people in this program for whom intuitive eating is important, and I respect that. Um, but as you will see, intuitive eating was not something that worked for me. Anyway, this person also used to be a very hardcore OA person. And when I saw her again after starting intuitive eating, she was significantly bigger than I remembered. Um, and that's not a reflection of somebody's spiritual um, condition, I don't think, in my opinion. But there was something else about it. I don't know. It's hard to explain now, but starting to do that for me, I lost my center, and I'll talk more about it. Anyway, long story short, I decided that I was going to try intuitive eating and I was going to start eating what I liked because, I'd done this weighing and measuring thing, and maybe that was a crutch. And now it was time for me to trust God more. And that's the thing. I genuinely convinced myself that this was a trusting God, deeper spirituality thing. My disease is amazing. It's like amazingly cunning because it knew it wasn't going to get me from the front. It had to come around the back. And so I remember it was this night at my house. My daughter brought her boyfriend's family, her boyfriend at the time, their family over for dinner, and they had brought home a cake. They had brought a cake over, and I looked at my husband and I said, "Can you give me a piece?" And he looked at me and was like, "What?" Like he's only ever known me abstinent, so he was like, "I'm like, it's okay," and he was like, eh. So I took a piece of cake and I ate it, and he was flabbergasted. Then I said, "Can you give me another piece?" And he said, in front of this family, he was like, "What are you doing?" And they probably thought like he was like this really controlling husband, like, but really he was like, he's like, "You tell me for 15 years that if you eat these things, you're going to die. And now you're asking me to give them to you. What is that about?" So I just told him to go away. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And I spent the next 3, 4 months in total food obsession. Just complete, like, it wasn't even that I was binging because I really wasn't. I really only ended with one major binge at the end, which I'll get to. But really, I just spent the next 3 to 4 months constantly thinking about what I could eat, what and where I was going to eat it, my weight gain, because I was gaining weight very quickly, and how to control that weight gain. So, like I said, I wasn't binging, but I was just eating throughout the day. Like I would have like breakfast and then I'd have a snack and then I'd have lunch, but I wasn't even hungry. I was just never hungry anymore. I was just eating all the time. And I would sit. I remember one night, my middle son, he was 9 years old at the time, and he was talking to me, and I remember sitting there and being like, I'm not listening to him at all. I'm just thinking about what I'm going to eat when he goes to sleep. And it was weird to me because it wasn't like it was when I first got abstinent or like when I was really in the disease where like I was laid out, not functional, calling out sick to work. Now I was still a highly functioning person. I was going to work every day, doing what I needed to do, but my brain was somewhere else. And that anchor, that foundation that I always had through meditation and prayer, and it felt really fuzzy. That's the signal was off, and I could not balance my emotions. I couldn't navigate my own behavior. I just felt really unsteady for like 3 or 4 months. I behaved in ways I hadn't behaved in years. I felt like I had no tools, no protection. Mind you, I was calling my sponsor every day and going to meetings, but like I just felt not myself. This thing that I had built for 15 years just was not there. Anyway, but I kept telling myself that this was okay. It's okay. This is just a learning curve. This is, I'm eventually going to like find my way. And then one night, it was New Year's Eve, I remember, and I went to my friend's house. And there's a comedian who I really like. Her name's Margaret Cho. And she talks about how, like, during the day she would diet and be really hungry. And then she'd come home and put on her eating dress and, like, eat like everything in the kitchen. Like, that's what I did. I put on my eating dress for this party. Okay. Like, not even pretending anymore that I was just, just going to try a little bit of everything. By the end of the party, I was standing over an entire ice cream cake, eating it with a spoon. Like, not a piece on a plate. It was just like me eat. And my husband said to me, I don't think this is intuitive eating. I was really mad at him, but it was true. And I looked and I realized that I had gained like 30 pounds in like 3 or 4 months. Um, so that was the food piece. The other piece that was happening simultaneously was my effort to control the weight I knew I was gaining. And I decided that I was going to, I couldn't just like start taking walks every day. I decided I was going to train for a half marathon because I would do it under the guise of being a good person because I was raising money for this charity or whatever. But really, it was just weight control. That's all it was. Long story short, I trained for this marathon and I hate every second of it. That's the truth. I hate running. I really do. And a friend of mine who used to run track said that no human being, except for those who are like conditioned to run across vast savanna, should ever run more than 3 miles at a shot. Like our bodies are not designed for that. And I was just like, I knew that on a spiritual level, but I feel very validated right now when she told me that. But anyway, so I trained in, winter in New Jersey, like 30-degree weather, running 9 miles at 5 a.m., like a freaking crazy person. And then I went to the half marathon, which started at 8 a.m. in 80-degree weather in Florida. I ran about a quarter mile and I looked at my best friend and I said, I can't do this. But I wouldn't stop. So I walked the whole thing. I walked 13 miles. By the end, I had a complete mental breakdown The chafing was so painful. I could barely walk. And the next day I ended up in the hospital with dehydration. Um, 2 IV bags of fluid. And because it's America, that cost me like $2,500 for freaking bags of salt water. Um, but that's what I do to myself. And so that was a relapse of sorts also, of not knowing, not understanding the importance, or not understanding that I was also using exercise in a way that was abusive to myself. So I went to this party, like I said, and it was a New Year's Eve party, and my husband called me out. And I knew he was right, even though at the time I didn't want to hear it. And the next morning, I called my sponsor, my old sponsor, the one who I had fired, and said, I want to start again. And she said, sure. And that was over 5 years ago. And I've been abstinent ever since. So I basically say I've been abstinent for 20 years with like a 3 month commercial break in there. But the truth is, no, I had 15 years of abstinence, a 3, 4 month relapse, and then I'm abstinent again for 5 years, thank God. Um, but the mental state is really what was fascinating to me this whole time, because it wasn't about the food calling to me. The food was the very last thing to go. It was the resting on my laurels, saying I was too busy, and holding on to a really, really deep resentment. And I had to do some serious, serious work around that resentment. Because sometimes in life, things happen to us where we are 0% culpable and the other person is 100% culpable. It happens. Usually we're encouraged in the big book to always look for our part, right? I had no part in this. I didn't do anything wrong. And it wasn't fair. But that was my problem. My part in it was that I was demanding fairness in an unfair world. No one ever, ever said that life was fair. No one said that. I grew up on Disney movies where like the bad guy dies and everyone's happy at the end. Life doesn't work like that. There are weak people and there are sick people difficult people who I have to deal with. Bad things happen. I'm living in the middle of a war right now where there is tragedy happening constantly every single day. There was a terror attack 3 blocks down from me last week. I didn't do anything wrong, but I can't demand fairness from an unfair world. And if I do that, I'm going to end up in relapse. So ultimately, I had to accept the fact that this happened and forgive. And forgiveness, I've said this before, but forgiveness for me, and I'm quoting Sandy Beach here, who's an AA speaker, it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that what happened was okay, because it's not okay. It was a not okay thing. And I say this to sponsees who come to me who are victims of abuse. Anyone who's abused, you know, obviously there are circumstances that are more complicated, but the point is 9.9 times out of 10 is if someone is abused or assaulted or molested, you didn't do anything wrong. There was somebody who came and did something to you, and it's horrible. But we still have to decide if we're going to demand fairness from an unfair world. I'm not saying that what happened was okay. I'm not saying what happened to me was okay. It was deeply unfair, deeply traumatic, and I still deal with it. It's still something I'm working through. But I have to let go of the idea that it shouldn't have happened. That's the difference. That's what forgiveness is. I have to let go of the idea that it should not have happened and it shouldn't have happened to me. Who am I to decide that? How do I know what should happen to me and what shouldn't happen to me? Now, that's a really hard pill to swallow, especially for people who have gone through way worse traumas than I have. In the scheme of things, that's actually like nothing. Okay, I lost a job and some people said some bad stuff about me. Like, okay, there are people who have been through way worse. But the fact of the matter is that ultimately, if I want to live a free life, it doesn't really matter what happens to me. I have to accept that it happened. Sandy Beach says forgiveness is giving up hope of having had a better past. I'll say that again. Giving up hope of having had a better past. So, I there were years where, I resented my mom because she wasn't what I wanted her to be. It's because I was holding out hope that my past would have been better. I wish that I was holding out hope that I would have a more idyllic childhood, which was, I had a pretty idyllic childhood, but somehow, I demanded more. I can't hold on to my ideas of how things should be because they'll kill me if I let them. They will convince me that I don't need to keep doing what I'm doing. And it happened once, and I don't want it to happen again. So for me, relapse came when I chose to put myself back in the driver's seat of my life and decide what was allowed to happen to me and what wasn't. Um, I know people who have come in and they've had that high cloud, they call it the pink cloud, where they come in and they get struck abstinent and they're so excited and they're really doing it, they're abstinent every day, they're working their tools, but they fail to enlarge their spiritual life. I know somebody who has been in this program for a year. They've been abstinent for 6 months. They're really, going to meetings, working this, not working the steps, excuse me, going to meetings, calling their sponsor, being part of the fellowship, but they're not working the steps. And even though it's working for them right now, I can tell you from experience that if we fail to enlarge our spiritual life, it's not going to stick. It's just a fact. And it's this book, the big book, they deal in facts, right? They talk about the facts. The great fact is, right? So the fact of the matter is, these are people who would drink and drink and drink and drink and drink. There's two people here they talk about. This guy who found out about AA, got his life together, was feeling great, and then didn't do what he needed to do and relapsed. That's literally what happened to me. It's not like you couldn't tell me that I didn't have the information. I had the information. I had 15 years of abstinence and I was maintaining like, an 80-pound weight loss. Like this wasn't news. And it wasn't, and I had seen people relapse before. So it wasn't even unheard of to me. Yet somehow this disease is cunning enough that it will get me in ways that I don't expect. And that means that I have to keep clearing out my own character defects because those are what I'm going to trip over. Um, now the things that are really I struggle with are, I don't think about food like anymore. People tell me like newer in abstinence, I have food thoughts, I have cravings. I don't have that. Thank God I haven't had that in years. Yeah, I can't even remember when I had food cravings, except like when I was obsessing about food and relapse. But I genuinely don't think about food anymore. In fact, I don't have much of an appetite these days for a variety of reasons. But it's my thinking that will get me into the self-pity that will convince me that food will make it better, or that I'm justified, or that I deserve it, or that I can do it now because I'm all better. I'm not. I'm not all better. There is no all better in this program. It says they're like people who have lost their legs, they never grow new ones. Or, you turn a cucumber into a pickle, it's not going back to being a cucumber. So just because I've been abstinent for an extended period of time doesn't mean I can put substances in my body and it's going to be a-okay. And the truth is, it doesn't even mean for me, and this is only for me, okay? Even not weighing and measuring is a problem for me because I can justify mountains of food. I had this last year where for like 6 months I ate 3 meals a day, but they were big meals and I gained weight. And again, this is not a judgment or telling anybody else what to do with their program. You do you, whatever works for you, great. I want you to just feel complete and satisfied and happy in what you're doing because there should be joy here and satisfaction. For me, I can still find little ways to mess around. So like those boundaries are so good for me and they feel so good. Um, and what it's telling me is that nothing has changed in the fact that I'm fighting with the disease. It's just like somebody with diabetes, type 1, I should say. Like somebody with diabetes type 1, They have to take it, even if you've been taking insulin for 28 years, you still have to take it today because you still have diabetes. Like it doesn't go away. Um, it's the same thing. And that means that I have to keep deepening, enlarging my spiritual life, which honest sometimes feels exhausting. I have to do more. Thank God, I do a lot. I really do. And in my, not just spiritually, but in my life in general. Like I said, I have a lot of kids. I have a house. I have work. Money's always tight for us. God decided that, thank God, I'm grateful every day that that's our biggest problem because nobody here has health issues. Nobody here is like, we've had some mental health issues with my kids, but nothing crazy. Like everybody's okay. So like, okay, I'll just be broke sometimes. That's fine. Um, but like it's so it sometimes feels like so much just to keep afloat, just to be a person, that having to feel like I have to enlarge my spiritual life feels like a lot. It really does. It does feel like a lot. Um, but I don't have the luxury of not doing it, unfortunately. And if that means letting go of something else, then that's what I have to do. Right now, I'm really in heavy work mode, trying to network and get clients, and it's really intense. I'm also addicted to it, so there's that. Um, but if I feel like it's throwing me off balance, which I have been in the last few days, I have to get back to basics. I don't have the luxury of getting distracted. So I spent, 40 minutes on the yoga mat this morning. I did my prayer and meditation. I did my two-way prayer because I have to, I have to. I know what happens when I don't. And I have so many excuses not to. Oh, I'm up at 6 a.m. and then I have spend 2 hours getting three kids out the door. And yeah, okay. So after they leave, you can do the things, or you can get up earlier and do the things. And if you don't want to get up earlier, that's okay. Just do the things at some point. So yeah, while my 16-year-old is, getting ready for school, I'm on the yoga mat. It's okay. He's okay. Everybody's okay. Um, yeah, these are the things I have to do because ultimately it's about that relationship with my higher power who I choose to call God. If I am trusting and relying, if I have made the decision to turn my will and my life over, that means that whatever happens to me is the thing that's supposed to happen to me. And I think about that a lot these days. Like I said, we had a terror attack here a few days ago. And thank God my son had missed the bus that day, so he didn't go to school. And his bus driver texted us and said, "Hey, there was this terror attack. We don't know when we're getting back. There's a lot going on, whatever." And I was just like, okay. I said to my son, I was like, God hooked you up today. You didn't have to deal with that. Um, but if he had been there, I would have to deal with that too. I'm interviewing a lot of people these days, and somebody said something that I really loved about the question why. Why, and I've said this before, I think why is an irrelevant question. Her father used to say to her, "Don't ask why, ask what can I learn from this?" And I really see that. I spent so much of my life, why me, why me, why me, why did this happen to me? There's no answer to that question. And if there is, I'm not going to find out while I'm alive. The real question is what? What is happening? What do I need to do about it? What's my job here? Um, and that's why I see a lot of people struggling when they first come in with, you know, why am I a compulsive overeater? Maybe it's my childhood. Maybe it's this trauma I went through. Maybe it's this. Maybe it is. Maybe it's all those things. So what? Now what? So if you want to spend 20 years trying to figure out why, you can, or you can just say, okay, this is what it is. Now what do I do about it? And that's why in the big book, they don't spend a significant, no, well, they spend about 40 pages out of 164 talking about alcohol. Okay. And then after that, they talk about what you're supposed to do about it. And so for me, um, once I decided I didn't want to be in relapse anymore, I focused on the what am I supposed to do about it, which was getting abstinent again, working the steps again, making amends to people I didn't want to make amends to. And some of them were super uncomfortable and people were not kind to me. But you know what? That's okay. I did the thing, right? That's what this is about. It's about doing the thing and staying connected, and remembering who I am and accepting life on life's terms. I know somebody in program. I've known her a long time, and she told the group, she shared that years ago, her husband died in a motorcycle accident. And the first thing that came out of her mouth when she heard that news was, "Thank you, God." Not because it was a bad marriage, she loved her husband, but because she had turned her will and her life over, which means that anything God gave her was for her good or would lead her somewhere that she was supposed to go. I don't know if I'm at that level, but I do strive to have that kind of faith. In Judaism, when we hear that someone passes away, we say, "Blessed is the true judge." In other words, like there is someone else orchestrating what's going on. And I made a deal when I started these steps that I was going to trust that conductor. I'm like a mediocre flutist who's trying to conduct the whole orchestra, when really I just need to keep my butt in my seat and play. Um, so for today, I am abstinent, not in relapse anymore. But and the other thing I'll say also is that having long-term abstinence is not good for the ego. It's I mean, it's great for the ego, but it's not good for the ego. Because the biggest, and I heard someone in AA say this, one of the worst things for our program is anything that happens where we can convince ourselves we did it on our own. Because if we think that we have any control over it, we will take credit and God gets elbowed out. So 15 years of abstinence, it's easy to start thinking, listen, I got the hang of this. I can do this now. I got this. It's no big deal. I've done this 1,000 times. I've been to the same meetings. I've heard the same things over and over. I know what this is. I already know. But I don't, apparently. So however I need to make it fresh, I need to make it fresh. I don't do this monthly workshop for you. Just letting you know. I do it because I need to remind myself that I have a job to do here. Yeah, so I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful today. That's all I got. Thanks.